Welcome back to Swiftologist. I'm Zach, and I am here with the internet's busiest bald-headed scallywag, Anthony Fantano. Welcome back, or welcome
I'm
here.
back. I'm back, and I'm still bald.
Still
Still
bald,
bald. Has
still a
not changed.
scallywag.
Yes,
Are
absolutely.
you showgirling today?
I wouldn't say I'm showgirling.
You're kind of a showgirl. Come on, Anthony Fantano is a
I'm
showgirl.
showgirling several tracks. So I was actually very pleased to see in your recent ranking of all the songs on Showgirl that we line up on a lot of songs. I think we're kind of together on a lot of tracks. I mean, maybe there's a differential there in terms of how much we're like enjoying the record respectively, but I feel like we have a lot of similar faves and least faves.
Well, the thing is that I watched your review and mostly said, that's true, that's
Mm.
true, that's true.
I influenced you. You just took my
Yes.
opinions out of my mouth. You just stole them.
That's not a position that I cherish to be in. I have to say this has been one of the harder release weeks for me because, I want to come out the gate and say this is the best album ever made and f you for disagreeing. But
Right.
unfortunately, that's not my reality this time around. It is an interesting album. I like it, but I actually haven't given my review yet. So that's still up for debate for everyone to
Oh
stay tuned
wow.
in here.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
haven't been able to form a coherent thought fully on it. I have differing thoughts, but actually, I think when where we see the value in the record, I think we're the same. And actually, for the weak points, I think we're actually also kind of the same. So I
Hmm.
wanted to start with kind of your relationship to Taylor Swift because I went and watched all your reviews. I pulled all your scores. And you've gone on kind of a journey with Taylor. You gave Reputation a strong 4. I
Hmm.
feel as though you may give it a different score had you heard it now. Do you think that you would, or are you still kind of rocking with that strong 4?
I would say I'm about in the same ballpark, but I mean, however many. When did that record drop again?
Oh,
It was
almost
like,
like 9 years ago at this
yeah,
point?
that's what
Long
I was
time
thinking. It's
ago.
almost been a decade. I mean, a decade later, I probably am going to have a different perspective on a record. You know what I mean?
The world is different now.
I mean, the Swifties themselves were not hot for the most part on that album when it first came out, but it seems like there has been a bit of a critical reanalysis of that album. I do generally see a lot more positivity toward that record because, I mean, I have like a pretty strong awareness of like what the kind of blowback is that I've gotten for a lot of the major reviews that I've done over the years. And when it comes to Taylor Swift, that is obviously one of my more negative reviews, and that is a review that, like, this one stands out in my memory is like I didn't really get a whole lot of blowback for this review in comparison to maybe other albums that I've done, album reviews that I've done of her work in the past. But I do feel like, these days I do, again, generally see a lot more positivity toward that record. So, I mean, I think it has grown on some people, or there is something that, like, retrospectively isn't hitting people as negatively as, maybe that album did out of the gate. And who knows, maybe this album will see a similar treatment 10 years down the road when Taylor Swift puts out what is to be perceived as one of her worst albums at that point. And the people are like, actually, maybe we were too harsh on Life of a Showgirl.
Somehow, I don't think that's gonna happen personally.
Hmm.
I think that this kind of goes into to share my views, I would probably put this in, like, the bottom 3 of Taylor Swift records. And I mean,
Hmm.
she's at record 12 now, right? There's just so much material. It's kind of inevitable that there's gonna be something kind of middling and bad at some point.
Yeah.
But back to
Nobody puts
your
out 12 perfect albums.
It's not possible. And, like, when you look at
No.
her contemporaries too, like Ariana Grande, Lady Gaga, they've put out, like, 6 or 7 albums at this point and have been producing for roughly the same amount of time.
Mm.
So, I think when you generate that much, obviously there's gonna be more slop in the mix. But
Mm.
back to your, experience reviewing Taylor Swift albums, what was the one where you felt like the blowback was really, really insane and you weren't expecting to have such a forceful response?
Um, hmm.
I have a
I don't know.
guess.
And I would love to hear your guess, but I guess like I would say like in recent years, I don't know. I mean, I will say like Taylor Swift, for as vicious as the Swifties can be, some of the worst, like, harassment and blowback that I've gotten for certain reviews hasn't historically been just from Swifties.
Mhm.
I feel like it could potentially be, and not that, if I did genuinely feel this way, I wouldn't pull any punches. I feel like I would be getting some of the scariest blowback of my career if I was coming out here and just being like, this album's a zero, it's trash, it's the worst thing I've ever heard, there's nothing good about it. Taylor Swift shouldn't be famous. She has no validity as an artist. She and just say like blatantly untrue, like some people say and get away with, like, she doesn't even write her own stuff, like some crap like that. If I was coming out with here with those kinds of takes, which I know you see and I know you've heard because people just, they just say them, I
Mhm.
probably would be getting that kind of but I do think that there are, and I have been seeing comments under my most recent review of people being like, it's and obviously there are Swifties in your comments that will disagree, but it's like, oh, I like that he's like, fair. He may not like some of her music, but he doesn't try to deny her success or act like she is invalid as an artist and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I think the blowback could be scarier, but I mean, in terms of like the biggest response that I've seen thus far, in terms of negativity, maybe like Midnight's, or there are some fans who think that I could have been more generous to the Folklore Evermore era, considering like how positive
Really?
I was in
Oh,
response, how positive I was with respect to some of her other records. But I would say maybe about, Midnight's possibly. I
I
don't
was
know.
gonna say Tortured Poets because you
Mm,
gave it a strong 3, which is the
I did give it
lowest
a strong
score
3.
that you've
I
ever
did give it a
given
strong
Taylor
3.
Swift.
Mm,
And that was the one where I really remember people being like, "We need to kill him." And this time around, people have been like, I agree with you. What you've seen in your comments is actually reflecting like what I'm hearing from the bowels of
mm,
the Swiftie community.
mm,
People are happy that you have been fair. And that kind of speaks to the wider critical and general public response to this record, which has been overall, I would say, extremely negative, disproportionately so. And of course, you would think I would be primed to say that because I'm the Swiftologist, but I genuinely think that people like we're doing racism, we're doing MAGA Barbie, we're doing capitalism, Queen. Like it's just every allegation that could possibly be flung, other than
mm.
talking about the music, is happening. So I felt that your review was very fair. And honestly, you know what? Agreed. Co signed most of, which is unfortunate for me because I don't want to be saying, yes, light four for Showgirl, but it kind of is a light four.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I see some of those criticisms, and there are, and obviously, like, I did echo some of them in my review, and there are some people who I'm sure, and I even saw comments saying this, like, there are Swifties who are going to hate this review for being too low, and there are going to be people who hate Taylor Swift
Hmm.
who hate
Yep.
this review because you weren't hard enough. And I feel like in order to go that overboard, I would have to see no validity in any of the songs. And, even some of my least favorite catchy songs on there do have, or sorry, least favorite songs on there on the record do have catchy moments or moments that I find to be a little bit endearing. Like, for example, I know you're not like a crazy fan of Wood, and neither am I. But like, some of what Taylor is playing with on that track, like the wood knocking,
Hmm.
sound
It's
effect.
cute.
And
It's
it's
cute.
cute. It's cute. And I feel like Taylor is in a position, for as much as like we don't see her in the same light as like a Sabrina Carpenter, for example. I think she could get away with a little bit, a little bit of a reference wink, just like a
Hmm.
little bit, just a tiny bit. But it just like, but when she loves to commit to a bit,
Yeah,
so it's
she
like
committed to that bit
she
hard.
really committed to the bit hard, and I think like overplayed her hand a little bit on that one, to the point where I feel like the original, or what could have been the original intent or meaning of the song, got kind of lost, and like, yeah, let's just be kind of like filthy with it just because we can be, and I'm kind of feeling myself a little bit here.
It's
um
cute until we get to the post-chorus when it's like, "He hypnotized me and opened my thighs." It's like it's not clever, it's just
right.
overt, and I think that's the difference between her and Sabrina Carpenter, is that most of the time, even when Sabrina Carpenter is being shocking, there's something very wry and clever about it, like, "Come ride on me, I mean camaraderie." That's hilarious. That's genuinely
Yeah.
very funny in a very raunchy song, and the Taylor Swift moment the knock on wood is cute, but it's not clever. So it has the overall effect of being a bit cringe, which is kind of like part of her brand and is definitely something that I think people are. It's surprising me that people are only just now realizing that she's like a lame 35-year-old white lady. Like that. She always has been that. She's always kind of millennial cringe. Like that is it's part of what I love about her. Like she's just uniquely herself. But speaking of, I would like to ask you, just back to your overall experience and journey with Taylor Swift. What would you say are your like three favorite albums and songs that describe what you like most about her?
I would say again, like Folklore and Evermore continue to age pretty well for me. I
Hmm.
would say probably Red is underneath that. And while I don't think it's her most cohesive project, it does have a lot of great songs on it. I would say Lover is another highlight for me. There's just so many catchy songs
Wow.
on that record. And again, it's not her most focused project, you know. I know that a lot of people obviously like ride really hard for 1989. And there's a lot of bangers on there, but simultaneously it's like, not my favorite pop album of all time. It's very cohesive, it's very focused, it's very punchy. I mean, I get it. And it's like really her full
But it's
pop
not for you.
transition, but it's just not my favorite of hers. It's like the type of indie synthified brand of pop that album is going for. There's just other places I guess I would rather kind of hear that, you know.
I'm
Um
getting a sense of what kind of Taylor Swift that you like, and it's like the polarities. It's the like the singer-songwriter, "I'm gonna kill myself," versus like, "I'm an idiot and I love my London boy," and that's pretty much it. And I love those 2 parts of her, so it's interesting. I'm surprised that you would pick out Lover as an album that you really like, but it makes sense to me that you had a more positive reaction to Showgirl versus something like Tortured Poets, because Showgirl is more dynamic musically. I feel like there's a lot more going on with it than there is with something like Tortured Poets. If you love the lyrics and the writing, like Tortured Poets is very much there for you to discover. But Showgirl, I think, appeals to the kind of everyday pop listener who wants something very straightforward from a pop album. It hits those marks. So I wanted to ask you, why do you think that this album has been so much more polarizing than even more so than an album like Tortured Poets? What is it about this album that you think is really dividing people?
I think a lot of it does kind of come down to the lyrics, honestly. I mean, speaking with my partner and kind of seeing a lot who, also uh, is a big I don't want to say Taylor Swift fan, but she's been listening to Taylor Swift ever since she was young, and has obviously her criticisms of her, though she doesn't go as deep into it to where she's like supporting every album. She she's not one of these people who's just kind of blindly supporting her, talking with her, and kind of just like observing the sort of dialogue that I see people kind of where Taylor Swift fans engage on a regular basis. Like her lyrics continue to be or are always like a bit of almost like the keystone that holds the whole bridge together, because that's always like the first line of defense in terms of like talking about how good her music is or how valid she is as an artist. Like her lyrics are personal, they're totally her, they are something of substance, and I'm getting something from her in terms of her writing that I don't get from any other artist out there in the pop sphere. And I feel like it's on the lyrical front that Taylor kind of disappointed first and foremost on this record, to where fans were being hit with maybe a little bit too much, as you were saying, like cringe. And I feel like they were also losing a bit of the specificity of what they get from Taylor that they don't get from anybody else. And on top of that, losing what they felt was like almost like, I don't know, the branding or the person artistically they came to kind of like know and love. I think there were a lot of fans looking at the way she was portraying herself on tracks like The Opener, as well as like Wish List, and we're kind of seeing that just being like, this isn't the person who I fell in love with, like this is a totally, completely different person, even canceled too. Like this is not the person who, and here's the thing is like, how could you ever really truly know somebody just through their songwriting, and even to sort of like observe them as much as you can through interviews and so on and so forth beyond that, like you fully can't, but like still like all of that stuff does build up an image about somebody in their minds that I feel like is maybe not being entirely broken on this album, but the visuals being cracked a little bit, and and who's to say, it's like that doesn't necessarily mean this album is an actual representation of who Taylor Swift is. It just feels like a little bit of an inconsistency, in terms of some of the tone of the writing and the messaging, to where people are feeling a little disillusioned and they don't know purely what to believe.
It's definitely an aberration. Like, it feels like she has veered off like a strange side road that people will go down with her, but I don't think that people are interested in really like exploring this avenue that she's charting. And like, just from my own observations, as like, obviously, my Patreon community is full of like Taylor obsessives. Like, we have had people that have been completely like, I'm quitting the Patreon. Like, I don't want to hear
Mm.
any more discussion about her. I've been put off by this like movie, this scam, the music. This is so not what I signed up for. Where is the Taylor Swift that said back then I swore I was going to marry him someday, but I realized some bigger dreams of mine on a song called 15 that specifically says, in your life, you'll do things greater than dating the boy on the football team. I mean, like,
Right,
she
exactly.
kind of set herself up for that one.
Right, right.
So there is that. And then there's also the like the reverse, I suppose, which is the like really diehard. I've noticed a lot of like older millennial women are really defending Taylor's right to say he traumatized me. They're saying that's literature. They're saying that you don't understand it the way that I understand it because I also have a big sweaty man that I want to let inside me. And, that's their journey to go on. But I do think that something about her core appeal is lacking on this album. It's not totally gone because there are songs like Father Figure where I see her present and I'm like, you are scary. And in an interview, she said that she was inspired by Logan Roy. She identified with Logan Roy and wrote that song. And you picked up
Hmm.
on this in your review. You were like, this feels almost scary. Like there's something sinister about that. And like that's the Taylor Swift that I love and I like to hear more from because I think it's the most honest and like raw part of her that kind of accidentally comes out from time to time.
I'm not
Um,
really surprised about that influence. I don't know if I put this in my review, but there was something even about the production on Canceled that felt like I feel like she's been just like digesting the Succession theme over and over and over. I feel like the Succession theme is in the back of her head
right.
on this instrumental, you know?
And it's
It does
interesting because
feel a
she's like
little
a
bit like
family
that.
business. Her
Right,
joke is we're a small family business. It's me, my mom,
right.
my dad, and my brother. So, there's a very interesting dynamic there that she rarely ever like hints at or points at. So that's an interesting thing that I would like to have discovered a little bit more about.
Mm.
But you also said in your review that this is some of her worst writing, as we're talking about. So do you think that is the lyrics themselves, or do you think it's like the intent behind the lyrics? Because it seems like people are confused as to what she's even getting at.
I think it's intent. It's, I think, look, I mean, there are a lot of like songs that we could look at from 1989, and even the Red era that are just like very straightforward, very plain. You're not like dissecting the deepest bars or wordplay or whatever to kind of get an understanding of what she's going for. It's not really about sort of like, how complicated the words are. For sure, it is that on some level. I think it's kind of like, layered here. But first and foremost, I think it's messaging and I think it's intent. I
Mm.
feel like people are reading just not the greatest intent, and as you were saying, like a bit of going down a different road here to in such a way to where it feels inconsistent. And when you couple that with writing that feels almost like beneath her, in
Hmm.
terms of like quality, in terms of like word choice and so on and so forth, it's almost like a 1-2. It's a 1-2 punch. It's sort of like again, it compounds. Like it would be one thing if it was maybe like a bit of a diversion, but maybe you were really impressed with the way that she said it, you know or
But there's
you
not a lot
know
of that going on.
right, exactly. And it's like and I think there are ways to kind of like maybe talk about the sorts of things that she did on this record, but maybe take the time to kind of like explain to the listener how you got there. I mean, even on Fate of Ophelia, as I said in my review, there is a bit of, a single line that I picked up on where she kind of acknowledges the fact that like, feeling this indebted, feeling my existence being this indebted to a man, that is kind of a different thing for me, you know?
Yeah. Let's
And
expand.
right, right,
Let's hear
exactly.
more about that.
See, here's the thing. It's like this it's such a funny thing to be kind of like torn on because, to sort of like present this kind of tone shift and point of view shift to the audience in the way that she did on a lot of these tracks. I feel like as much as we were talking about in our last conversation, like, man, she really needs to like find a way from Tortured Poets to kind of like edit things down, simplify things, you know,
She did.
May- and
She
and
did.
she did, but it just
Mhm.
so happened to be on topics and on feelings that people are like, wait a second, wait, well, hold the phone here. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like you're being a bit too brief on some of this stuff that really needs a bit more context. Like, in an age where we are in the news on a regular basis, between Diddy and David and so on and so forth, like seeing celebrities be caught doing or accused of the most heinous, horrible things. What do you mean by you're living in this underworld and all your friends are canceled and they're this and that? It's like, it's such a terrible message to kind of like just throw out there, and with no real context or explanation. I mean, when I hear her say lines like, oh, did you make a joke a man only could make, like I do get a sense of like, okay, maybe that's sort of like the depth of seriousness, that maybe that's the level of grave that we're talking about here. Maybe it only goes that far, but still, out of context, some of these lines read as like, who are you friends with?
What are you
Like what kind
yeah,
of
what are
people?
you who are you talking about? And
Right.
why do you wanna be friends with them? You're making them sound like the worst people in the world, and you're hitching your wagon to them too, so you're also terrible. I mean,
Right.
it's like the lack of clarity there betrays her. It makes her seem more evasive and calculating than I think she actually was. That song is, I think, one of the truly terrible moments on the record, like a low point. One of my personal, like, bugbears with Taylor is that she continues to sing about being canceled in ways that are uninteresting. Like, it stopped being interesting when I think she closed up pretty nicely on the title track of Evermore. I thought this pain was going to be forevermore. Now I know it's not. Okay, let's move on. But no, we have to do Thank You, Amy, one of the worst songs ever made. We have to do Cassandra. And now we have to do Canceled, which sounds like someone was saying that it sounded like a Reputation Vault track. And I was like, don't disrespect Reputation like that. This
Hmm.
is new garbage that was made recently for this album. And I think she cannot stop reminding us that she was once canceled. And I think that like the more she mentions it and the more successful she comes while she's doing it, it gives her some sort of like validation. This is a psychic wound that has not healed for her. So another moment that you kind of indicated might be a little bit unfinished, and I really resonated with this one, was actually romantic.
Hmm.
It doesn't quite go there. It almost gets there on the bridge when she's doing that, like, and a lot of people have pointed out this is the most actually sexually charged she sounds on the record, because
Hmm.
I think that the most sexual thing to Taylor Swift in the world is having a conflict with someone. I'm not trying to court the Gaylors, by the way. I just want to make that clear for them. This is
Hmm.
about conflict, it is not about the person. But it builds up to this like tension, and the verses just don't have that same kind of bite. And I was surprised because this is a Max Martin number, and he is kind of the king of, a lot of people were saying this sounds like an Olivia Rodrigo song, which really what you're saying is it sounds like an Avril Lavigne, a Kelly Clarkson, like that kind of thing.
To me,
And
Avril
it
Lavigne's like
doesn't
the closest kind of point of comparison.
and Taylor has had Avril Lavigne moments before. We Are Never Ever
Hmm.
Getting Back Together was a Max
Right.
Martin Taylor Swift moment that really, like, that bangs. That really goes where it
Yeah,
needs
I
to
mean
go.
that's a great point of comparison, because in terms of like the way the chorus on the song bursts, like it
Mhm.
goes much crazier by comparison, and it, again, it's unfortunate because I feel like Avril and Taylor herself almost like laid out the blueprint for how to do that if she was going to do it, but it just didn't go far enough.
It felt as though she was really more focused on, like, landing the disses rather than also making a good song. It's not
Mm,
bad, but it feels unfinished, and that to me is very emblematic of the main, I guess, issue with this record is that, like, you can tell that it was made on weekends between Eras tour shows. Like, she was talking about how exhausted she was and how she was, like, not able to move her arms while she was writing these songs, and I was like,
mm,
"That makes sense. It sounds like you ran out of juice on a lot of these songs."
mm. Yeah, I mean, I could sort of like see the potential reservations with like maybe achieving what I would have ideally liked on that track, because are we really going like fully balls to the wall in terms of like making this the response that maybe it needed to be in terms of sort of like the fire and the aggression behind it to really make it pop off? Do we really go fully into the guitars and the rock direction and make this sound like the sore thumb sticking out that it could be in a track list of songs that a lot of which are produced in a way to where they sound like kind of refined and are,
Mhm.
showgirly and so on and so forth? I mean, I think there's, if you went into a glam direction, for example, there's a lot of ways to do a big rock track would make it sound theatrical, but as you were just saying, like, it feels like they didn't take the time to like really figure it out and really map it out. And I mean, I didn't say this specifically in my review. I've said this in other contexts, but like, Taylor's busier than any other artist out here. You know what I mean? And it still has not, for as much as like, I'm sure the money and the industry support and technology helps her be able to pull off everything that she's able to do, and having everybody willing to probably like work with her remotely or in a bunch of different contexts or travel with her, whatever it is. I'm sure like all of the I guess like access she has to resources allows her to get everything done that she's able to currently get done, in terms of re-recording the old stuff, putting out new stuff, touring, all the album promo, everything, all of it. And there's other stuff I'm sure I'm forgetting that you're already aware of, that everybody watching is aware of. um it still hasn't changed the fact that I still think that writing a good album still takes time.
Hmm.
That has not changed, sadly. In the age of AI, phones in our hands, everything, still writing a good song, writing a thoughtful song still takes time. And I think it's telling that some of my favorite Taylor Swift projects are albums that she came out with when she, like all of us, was locked inside. It didn't have anywhere to be or anywhere to go,
Other
other
than
than
in her
other than
phone.
just in the studio, just doing these songs, and just focusing on
Hmm.
doing these songs, and no other distractions, no other anything. I mean, I admire in her and I love in her, and I wish I saw it in more artists, the capacity and the drive to be able to sort of like, I'm going to do it all and try to pull off as much as I possibly can, and so on and so forth, and be ambitious and be driven. But I feel like just because you can pull it off doesn't mean you're doing all of it well. And I feel like, unfortunately, like, for art at all levels in the industry, success is purely defined by what we see is kind of like the capitalist response and the number of streams and so on and so forth. But that's not always an indicator whether or not the music is good. You know what I mean? I mean,
A
for
hundred
as many
percent.
for as many criticisms as we have of this record, and the fans clearly have of this record very vocally online, it still had an amazing first week, you know?
Well, broke the Adele record.
Right.
So that's kind
Exactly.
of major. 3.5 million copies is absolutely bananas. And you can call
Yeah.
it shilling, you can call it scamming, you can call it scheming, but like it resonates. Whatever she does will resonate. So the question, I guess, becomes like, if everything is going to resonate, why bother really trying or like really putting yourself out there? And I think with Showgirl, it's like most of it, you can tell that it was made quickly. And I've noticed this is a thing that pop artists at the moment are really loving to brag about in interviews. They're like, I wrote this song in 20 minutes and it was done and it was over. And 9 times out of 10, when a pop artist is saying, I wrote this song in 10 minutes, you can tell. I always think back to Chapel Roan. She gave an interview about, I think she was talking about Super Graphic, Ultra Modern Girl, which is a song from Midwest Princess. And she talked about how hard it was to write that song, because she said that like writing a banger, writing a silly pop song is so much harder than sitting down and writing a piano ballad. It requires you to fire on different cylinders. And it also requires you to have an ear for multiple things, not just story. And I think that you can kind of tell that on this album for Taylor, some of those cylinders fire. They never all go at the same time. That's what I think. There's when I tried to find like, okay, what's the great Taylor Swift song on this record? Because Lover is the closest contemporary to Showgirl, and like Lover had Cruel Summer. That's an
Mhm.
all-time great. So I can forgive what goes on the rest of the album when we have a Cruel Summer, but I
Mhm.
don't see anything close to a Cruel Summer on Showgirl. And that's not to say that it's bad. I just don't see it. Do you feel the same way?
No, I feel the same way. It does feel like she tried to, again, head into a more point A, point B songwriting, pure pop direction. Um, and comparatively, as I said in my review, it does feel like it is trying to provide the audience with something sweeter and easier to digest in comparison to like Midnight's, because that was, obviously more trim in comparison to the projects it's surrounded by. But I myself and a lot of fans were kind of disappointed by, a lot of the Jack Antonoff production, because it just felt so low impact and was really providing the punch that this album is in comparison. But she's like written bigger anthems. She's written bigger bangers. She's written tracks that, are far catchier and far more exciting than even the biggest highlights on this record. Um, yeah, it's, again, I feel like I'm kind of torn with this album. It's not a record that, it's obviously a record I don't like, but simultaneously, it's a record that I still see like a lot of potential in,
It's a bunch of
like
unfinished drafts almost. Like there's a lot of like very nearly good things there. And I think the production note that you're picking up on is really, you mentioned about actually romantic, like there were the glam rock, like there were different directions she could have gone with that. I think people were really disappointed in what Max Martin was able to do. There was a high bar for him to clear, right? People were expecting style, blank space, shake it off. We are never ever getting back together. These big, huge moments. And curiously, there just isn't one on this record. So, as someone who listens like much more than I would for texture and arrangement, how do you hear the difference between a Max Martin and a Jack Antonoff Taylor Swift record? And can you see that on this album playing out?
I feel like I didn't get it's it's a difficult question to answer because I feel like we're kind of splitting the difference a little bit because obviously we didn't get our typical Max Martin experience here. Um,
Hmm.
but I think that had a lot to do with the direction Taylor wanted to take the album in. I mean, it's so far and away in the past at this point, and obviously I'm not expert enough in Taylor's progression and um history to give the most accurate account of this, and maybe you could jump in here, but I remember in our last conversation we were talking about the potential of what her working with Max again could be, and part of what you said there was like Max makes her do this, Max makes her do that. Their working
Hmm.
relationship is kind of in such a way to where he puts her in a position where she's not going to be able to kind of do all this sprawl and so on and so forth. But as much as we were like kind of excited about her teaming up with Max for those reasons, once again, this record still to me felt like she was just fully and completely at every step in the driver's seat. You know,
Yeah, there
totally.
was
This
no, I'm
this didn't
taking notes.
this didn't feel like an even collaboration. This felt like she had a bit of a certain vague idea in mind, and Max and Shellback did everything that they could to sort of like serve that vision in the limited time that they had to serve that vision. Because obviously, again, this is not your typical Max Martin big anthemic over the top series of pop formulas that we're, well aware of at this point, not just with Taylor, but a host of different artists. This felt like a little more like it was trying to be refined and, a little more theatrical, a little more elegant, but simultaneously, it doesn't seem like the time and effort went into making sure every song served
Yeah.
that vision, and that the songs that did actually like presented the glitz and the glam and the theatrical magic, the drama that you would need in order to really make it kind of work. I feel like the moments in which we get that the most is like in the first leg of the record. And I feel like Taylor and Max and Shellback kind of cut their losses and figured, well, we've more or less kind of established this vibe at the start of the album. Let's just continue with the rest of what we have and let the audience kind of like presume it's still there as we go deeper
Yeah.
into the album. But by the time, and even before, but by the time you get to wish list, it's completely gone.
Hmm.
It's
The,
completely gone.
it's disjointed.
Any element of that vision that could have potentially been there throughout the entirety of this record is just not there. And, by the time we get to the closing track, it almost feels like, a bit of a slap in the face because how rushed the album is comes across most clearly on that song. Because, I mean, I can kind of see what it's going for in terms of like the storytelling and the different instrumental palette shifts. It's kind of like, watching her and Sabrina undergo like a series of like costume changes, like, oh,
Hmm.
whoa, I mean, I've ripped off my outfit and now I'm in like, coattails and I got the top hat on. And, it's like, it's
The
like you kind of,
mentor is teaching her mentee something. Like there is a dynamic there that is super interesting, but I think
right.
that song is a great example of like she kept saying in interviews that she was taking the precision of her folklore and Evermore writing and bringing
Hmm,
it back to Max Martin's production style.
hmm,
And I can see an attempt to do that there, but unfortunately, the prolific wordiness, there are too many syllables for Max Martin. Like the Fate of Ophelia is a great song, but I think Max Martin, if he really had his way with that song, he would have like really condensed the length of those sentences. And when I compare like his last fully, I think from start to finish produced pop girl record was Ariana Grande's Eternal Sunshine. I can hear Max Martin all over that. Like that is you can hear Robin, like We Can't Be Friends. Like there's a very specific Swedish footprint left there. And on Life of a Showgirl, I think that the dynamic, because she's so big, and I imagine those producers just get paid a ton of money to work with her. I think it's less collaborator and more kind of like, you are my henchman. Like I'm doing this and you have the privilege of helping me with that. So I tell you what to do. Whereas it seems like in their past dynamic, Taylor said Max was much more like he was the master and her and Shellback were students of his. She very much was like, we're on equal footing now. We're all masters of our craft. And it's like, well, are you a master of production, Taylor Swift? I don't think so. She's kind
Yeah,
of
no.
conservative.
Mm. No, I don't disagree. I mean, it feels like the creative dynamic has shifted, and for a host of different reasons, because her star has risen so much higher than it was when they first started working together. And on top of it, like, it's not like, obviously they have a history together, but it's not like they're working together all the time. And, clearly had the time to sort of like really work out what potentially would have worked the best here. And I'm sure even to a degree, I mean, as we both know, like Max Martin isn't, I mean, obviously still a legendary and talented producer, but he's not as prolific as he once was.
No,
And,
that's another piece of the puzzle, I think.
he's not as prolific as he once was. And, who knows, if it wasn't for Taylor Swift tagging him for this record, would he have had this much output this year anyway? Probably not. Like he's somebody at this point who can afford to do it if he wants to, or don't do it, depending on just his vibe that week or that month, you know?
He's been doing very forgettable stuff as of late. Like he did a front to back production effort for Conan Gray's album, and it was
Mm.
just like completely bland and flavorless. Like it was extremely boring for a Max Martin thing. And I think that is kind of telling of, you're right, his stature and his influence. Like, we have much bigger pop producers. I'd argue even Jack Antonoff has a much more like contemporary grip over what sounds current at the moment. Ryan Tedder's really coming up back again. It's interesting. He's circling back in with Tate McRae, Dan Nigro with Olivia Rodrigo and Chapel. Like there are different producers that are kind of spearheading pop girl sound. So with that in mind, how do you think Showgirl stacks up against the other big pop girl releases this year? We've got Sabrina Carpenter's Man's Best Friend. We've got Doja Cat's latest project. We have Addison Rae's debut, So Close to What by Tate McRae, Mayhem by Lady Gaga. How do you feel Showgirl is like sitting with the rest of those?
I mean, I wouldn't put it in the worst, you know,
What would you
but
put in the worst?
out of all those that you just listed,
hmm hmm
um,
I think you would say Addison, and for that I would have to execute you digitally.
yeah, I think it probably would be the Addison, but I mean, the thing is, like, I feel like Addison, for as all over the place as that album is, she did go into it with like a little bit more of a cohesive vision, or at least
Oh, there's a huge vision. hmm
ended up with a more cohesive vision than Taylor did. The thing is, like, I personally don't think that, having grown up in the era of, pop and dance music that she's obviously making clear references to, do I find it as interesting as anything that I have memories of in my adolescence or, in my years coming of age? No. But simultaneously, like, she had an idea and she stuck to it, and she's obviously she's doing it enough justice in the eyes of her fans to where they're excited about it, you know?
There's a vision.
Um,
I mean, I would love to really fully like get you for your Addison review, but I can't because we're talking about Taylor. So
because we're talking,
I have to bite my tongue.
maybe
Um,
maybe on the next one. But
maybe on the
like,
next one when I get
look,
into
here's the
taking you
thing.
to task for every
I do
review you've
have,
ever done.
I do have, I do, I will say this. I do feel like and I think I did say this in my review, the jump in vision and effort and focus and quality between this and a lot of the stuff she had come out with prior. I'm like,
hmm
okay, I see the progression. Is it where I
You'll
want
get
it to
it.
be?
One
No,
day
but
it'll click for you.
I feel like there's so much potential, and she seems like, she doesn't seem like she's taking it as casually as some successful pop girls that I've seen out there. Like, she seems like hungry. She seems like driven. She seems
I
like
had
she
the
wants to
privilege
improve.
of meeting her and
Mhm.
seeing her show, and she is I'm telling you, she's one of the smartest people I've ever met. She is a deeply intelligent person that thinks very deeply about her art and what she does. And I think a fundamental experience of the Addison Rae thing is like you have to be able to put your head out the car window and feel the wind coursing through your hair. You can't have that
Yeah,
experience.
I can't. I'm bald. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's really what it is.
So
There
there you
was
go.
there
That's me
was
getting you for Addison.
there was God, what was it? There were people in my comments saying that Anthony, you'll never get it because until someone tops you,
Oh my
then you'll
God.
understand.
Wow. Wow. For Addison,
Yeah, for
the gays are
Addison.
crazy.
Yeah,
They'll say
yeah,
anything. They really will
yeah.
say anything,
Oh
especially
no,
to you. They
I know they'll
love
say
to say
anything.
stuff to you.
Oh no, I know they will. They have said anything to me, believe me.
Veering
But
back to the albums that came out this year, I think the easiest comparison would be Sabrina Carpenter's Man's Best Friend.
mm,
And when I was thinking of like the highlights from that album, like Go Go Juice and House Tour and Manchild and Tears even, I was kind of like, in a way, Sabrina Carpenter is kind of out Taylor Swift when it comes to like really contemporary bulletproof pop songs, like undeniable hits,
yeah,
easy listening.
it's true. I mean, I feel like Sabrina Carpenter, she is not as much from what I've seen so far. She is not as much an albums artist as Taylor Swift is by comparison. I feel like she doesn't really go
Oh,
into her projects as effectively with a vision in mind, but the highlights are great. The
that's
highlights
the
are
thing.
fucking great. And the thing is, like, you can have a successful pop career. You can have a successful pop career and be completely buoyed by your singles. It's a thing, you know.
Hmm.
And the thing is, like,
Huge.
and you know what? In many cases that's not much more. I don't expect much more, you know. So I mean, I feel like Sabrina Carpenter isn't really in a position to where she needs to be anything else other than that, and she doesn't really try to sell herself as anything more than that. You know, she's not out here saying like, you guys just don't get the vision behind my album and so
Oh,
on and so forth.
she's
And,
not
you know,
explaining.
she's here to make some fun bangers. And, you know, she does put commentary in her music, and the way in which she works it in, I think is like very funny and very smart when it is done well, you know,
She really
when it is done
knows
well.
her vibe and her role, I think. And Taylor, when she was giving interviews for this record, was talking about how Sabrina is kind of one of the only people of her caliber, I would say, is not how she would say it, how I'm saying it, that can really withstand what you need to be able to withstand as a pop star of this magnitude at that level. She said she just has the right temperament for it. And I feel like that's an interesting dynamic between the two of them because when I really think about Taylor Swift, she kind of doesn't have the right temperament to be like a huge, big pop star like that. She's very reactive. She's very sensitive. She's very defensive. But then also she is able to silence all of that and continue being this like prolific producer. 12 albums in like just shy of 20 years is kind of crazy.
Mm. No, I agree. I mean, the one thing I will say about Sabrina, though, I do think her next project could benefit, especially from what I'm seeing on the highlights on this last record, could benefit from taking a bit more time with it, you know,
She needs a
because
pivot.
I feel like, I mean, not even just a pivot, but just like more time, because I
Hmm.
feel like between this record and her last record, I feel like you have a full album of amazing moments, you know, but like some of my least favorite moments from her last LP just felt like lesser tracks from her previous record, you know, or just
And her
something that
previous record was very, very bad.
right. You know, there were lots of lowlights on that album, but there were great highlights, you know,
Hmm.
that are still stuck with me today.
From
So I
emails I
mean,
can't send.
no, I meant
Oh,
from
short
Short
and
and
sweet.
Sweet, Short
I
and
was
Sweet.
like, I was like, you can't be talking about that
No,
flop album. The one
no. I
before
mean,
is really, but yeah, short
no,
and sweet is
I
great.
mean, Man's Best Friend, Short and Sweet. I feel like there was, because of the lack of time to like really develop the songs and develop maybe a slightly different direction, there's like a lot of creative overlap between the two
Hmm.
albums. And I feel like as tight as the records are, maybe more unmemorable moments than I would have liked. So I mean, you know, I feel like really kind of sitting down and developing some of these ideas and some of these sounds. I mean, even on her last record, there was that one song which I can't remember on the second half that had Jack, and it was the one song Jack produced, and it sounded like a
Was it
fucking
Slim Pickens?
that sounded like a Taylor Swift song. So it was like,
Which
okay,
one? Don't Smile, Slim Pickens. Was it like a slow song or a fast
it was
song?
a slower song. It was a slower song. It was
Honestly,
like
there
the
are some
acoustic.
snoozes on Short and Sweet. There's a couple moments where I'm like, I actually, as a video exercise, was like, let me combine Men's Best Friend and Short and Sweet into one playlist. And I got like 11 or 12 songs. And I was like, this is an album. Like, if we had just put all of that together and
Right.
bypassed the rest of the nonsense, like that would have been great. But I think like a challenge for pop stars now is that like back in the day, they were on the 2 year album cycle, right? It was like put out a single, put out another single. It's like a 3 month stretch. Then the album comes out, you have two more singles, and you have a year to tour and then a year to figure out what you're going to do next. Now it seems like the release schedule is so punishing. Like Tate McRae, the reason to me why she can't actually get at anything artistically solid is because she's put out an album every year for the last like 3 years. She's what, 21 years old? Like there's no way she's going to like be given the actual space and time to develop an idea or something interesting. And it really seems to be working against a lot of these pop girls.
And the thing is, like, you don't give audiences the time and space that they need to expect anything different either.
Hmm.
Like if you come back with a new single within a year of your last album, like even if it's you're not giving fans enough breathing room to sort of like think of you or perceive you in a different light, and as a result, like they're going to expect more of the same. And the thing is, like, you can only go through that cycle for so long until people start kind of feeling like, yeah, I'm just going to move on and listen to somebody else because I've kind of already like grown tired of your sound in the back of my mind. That's personally why, out of all the albums you listed earlier, I mean, I did give positive reviews to quite a few of them, like the Gaga, for example. But I feel like a bit of an unsung hero in that list is kind of the Doja Cat record. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like
Hmm.
aesthetically, stylistically, it is very much not on trend, and I feel like if there's a major flaw to it, it's not that, because the whole 80s revivalism thing is like just not the sound and not the direction
It's
of the
over.
moment.
We
But with
did
that
that.
being said, like I feel like the songs on that record, lyrically and writing wise, have some of the smarter and more meaningful explorations of love that I have heard on a pop record in the past few years. And the vocal performances are really wild and eccentric.
Hmm.
And she really kind of for again, for as much as that sound is not on trend at the moment, she really devoted herself to that aesthetic in a way that, comparatively, Taylor Swift didn't go as deep into the idea of giving the fans, a showgirl type sound as much as Doja Cat made sure that her fans got this 80s whether they wanted
Right.
it or not,
Doja
you
went
know?
full balls to the wall with that. And I think this is another problem with Showgirl is like, again, as you mentioned, when you don't give yourself enough time, a concept record as well is something that requires like holistic attention. Like the packaging and the photos and the videos can be great, but like that all needs to map out to the songs. And I think for a
Right.
lot of people, it was such a bait and switch for this record. Like we were expecting something bigger, shinier, more adventurous. And what we got was literally like kind of more of the same in a very slightly different font.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the thing is like another shocking thing that sort of hit me as weird, and only because like it would have been great if it did actually happen, and it seemed like it was just so deeply ingrained into the visuals and the promo and everything, was just the aesthetics and the style and the look of burlesque, of the art nouveau deco era, all that
The
stuff, but
visuals were great for
none of that
once.
turns up in the music. You
Mm-mm.
could sort of like squint your eyes and be like, maybe some of the string sections and piano bits here and there, maybe, but like it's not in the music. Even in the last track where you would think it would like turn up the most. I mean, the last track for sure, again, with all the palette switch ups, is theatrical in its own right, in the little outro that they do where they're saying bye bye to the audience.
Yeah, that's
It's like
cute. That's
there's
Showgirl.
something, yeah, no, for sure. There's the show girly, but the thing is like to have a really extravagant, almost like baroque pop, almost like sort of experience, sophisti pop type experience, where it's like we're really getting the orchestral hits, we're really getting the big sort of vibrant instrumentation that feels over the top, that feels theatrical. Like that would have been incredible. And Taylor Swift obviously like has the means and has the resources to pull that sort of thing off, but I feel like she just didn't give herself the time to do
R-
so. And the thing is like you have to sort of wonder why, because the thing is, like, it's not like she has a fan base, the sort of fan base that's just going to disappear if you give it another year. She doesn't.
We're
You know, it's
waiting.
like
We're staying tuned.
her fans will wait another year for a record that's better, you know? Her fans will wait
But they
another
also want
year.
the record that's not as good. This is the thing. The Taylor Swifties bar of excellence is kind of low, I would say. My
Mm,
first reaction when I was listening to it, I kept asking myself after each track, I was like, what's Showgirl about this? And I think, like you said, if you squint, Ophelia and Elizabeth Taylor are the most Showgirl-esque moments. But even I love Elizabeth Taylor. It's my personal favorite from the record.
yeah.
But it doesn't quite go to where it needs to go into that baroque pop or whatever what it could have been that would have elevated it up beyond just a regular Taylor Swift banger. Like what is
Mm,
truly showgirl about this record? It's difficult to tell.
mm. I don't disagree.
Well, I guess my final question to you would be if we wanted to get a strong 8, a strong 9, a strong 10 from Anthony Fantano for a Taylor Swift record, what would she have to do? Who would she have to collaborate? What would it sound like? How would it hit you?
That's a good question. And again, and I've said this before. I feel like there's a lot of people that sort of like, wonder what the criteria is. But I feel like to get a 10, there's no one way to skin a cat. You know, I mean, I feel like what is a 10 for Taylor Swift is going to be very specific to her. You know, it wouldn't be the
Mhm.
same standard or expectations that I would come at a Kendrick Lamar to Pimp a Butterfly with. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes. You would have a
obviously.
different expectation of her. You're not
Right,
really
exactly.
expecting, like, groundbreaking social commentary from
Right,
Taylor Swift.
exactly. But like, speaking on like as baseline as I can, because obviously like I don't want to get too specific about it, because it all really sort of depends on context. But like the things I would love to hear from Taylor Swift, and maybe as specific as I'll get, is like, especially given some of the songs from her last record, I feel like, and also given the current day music trends right now, I feel like she would just like kill with maybe not a full album, but an album that like dabbles a little bit more in country, like, and go back to her roots like a little bit, because like it's just so crazy, like given how hot that sound is right now and how obviously her roots are in that music. Like I feel like a song like that, was dying to come out. Off her last record, I forget the title off the top of my head, where,
Is it
she's
Fresh
like,
Out the Slammer? That
no,
is
no,
a country song.
it's the one where she's like, "And I'm having this baby," where
Oh,
she's
but
like
Daddy, I
singing.
love him. That's my
Yes,
favorite
yes,
song.
like that's a
Mhm.
great song, and it's like it should be a country song. It is a country song. It's just
Get
like
a fiddle and a banjo.
masquerading as if it's kind of like just doing it very lightly. You know what I mean? Like it needs to go fully into it,
Right.
But I mean, I feel like there's potential in sort of like her digging into that again, because of the fact again that she has a history with it, and I feel like she could do it in a way that even you have Sabrina Carpenter here exploiting that sound
It's
more than
Taylor's.
somebody who is at their roots a country artist in a
Take it
way.
back. Reclaim it.
But
Reclaim the sound.
I mean, like, feeding back into her roots as a singer songwriter, I feel like makes would do her justice, would do her better, would result in a better album. Finding a way to balance the, it is difficult, but still, like finding a balance between, we're writing songs that are direct, they're to the point, we're communicating something clear to the audience, we're committing to the bit, we have a topic, we have a focus, but we're like not getting into the weeds.
Yeah.
There's like, again, there's no perfect way to do this, but like, I feel like I feel like the issue with the past several records or the past several album cycles is that we're going too far into either one direction or the other, you know?
Mhm.
And I feel like if it's going to be a pop album, it's got to pop. It's got to have the layers. It's got to have, you know, the
Let it
joy, the
bang.
verve, the whatever.
Jesus, let
Let
it
it
bang.
bang. Let it
Yeah.
bang. Let it bang. But if it's going to not be that, if it's going to be low key, if it's going to be something more subtle, like the arrangements and the details have to be there. It can't just be sprawling. It can't just be open borders. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've got to segment and
We gotta
regulate
close
it
that up.
somehow. And it's got to be colorful. The
Mhm.
thing is, like, if it's going to be a pop banger, it's got to go hard. If it's going to be a finely crafted artisan chair that there's only one of, we've got to be able to zoom in on it at, 1,000 times and sort of like see the etching and,
Mhm.
the arm of the chair and see, oh, it's like I see how you kind of like, carved that, detail into it. It's got to be something that we can like really replay and digest and pull the layers back on, not just lyrically but instrumentally too. And I feel like that means working with a producer, whoever it is, who maybe she's going to have to let go of a little bit of control and sort of like find some balance there, and allow them to sort of like be able to like really color things and sort of like find the best way to kind of provide a great amount of musical detail while still complementing what she's doing. And as we've kind of been saying, like with Showgirl, finding a direction, finding a sound, finding a vision, and sticking with it, and like really sitting down and thinking like, how does every single song here, question every song, as good as it is, question every song, how does this contribute to the macro picture? Because there are clearly songs on this new record that don't contribute to the macro picture. And especially for an artist like Taylor Swift, I feel like you've got to think about, like, because you have this ongoing narrative about who you are as an artist, that we're kind of like hearing inconsistencies with on certain songs here. Like, how are we going to communicate those inconsistencies if they are there? How are we going to continue to take the audience on this ongoing journey and sort of get them to understand like what my evolution here is on some of these issues, to sort of just like, communicate to them clearly so that they still feel like they know you and they understand you through your songwriting in the way that Swifties, tend to prefer to, with her
Fixate.
music. Yeah.
Yeah, we like to fixate on her. I think that's a beautiful analogy of the chair, being able to zoom in, see the etchings. I think a country return, it seems to me that she's saving that. She's
Mm.
really keeping that as like her ace card in her back pocket. Like she's really waiting for the right time to play that. And I think when she does, hopefully what we will see with that is a true collaboration with another artist, as in like a producer or whoever it might be. A co-written album with someone would actually be something kind of cool that Taylor could do,
Mm.
but something where she surrenders part of her need to control, because everything is directed by Taylor Swift, written by Taylor Swift. It's so, I think post gaining losing ownership of her masters and getting it back, there was this huge focus on everything being by, for, and about her. And I think if she surrendered some of that, we could get at something really interesting, that kind of like midpoint that you're talking about that we're not able to find in the extremes. So I agree with you, Anthony Fantano. Country
I, I
record, Taylor, please.
I feel like and this is by no means a jab directly or simply at Taylor. I'm talking about like a prevailing trend in pop music and a lot of music these days. I feel like the DAW, the digital audio workstation, as it were, the fact that we can just sort of like create anything that we want on a laptop, you are yourself, like,
Mhm.
the studio, the master, the writer, the songwriter, the musician, the player on the record, like all rolled into one because of the way technology is like kind of like shaped things in the music industry. And that combined with the fact that like you have a lot of big stars and a lot of big names out there with a lot of resources right now, a lot of influence, a lot of social capital, and and this is like a good thing. You have pop stars out here who have a lot more control of their own destiny these days in the way that like someone like Britney Spears didn't,
Yeah.
at like
She
the
took
peak
her
of her career.
orders.
Right, exactly. Even as recently as, within the past several years. So I mean, all of those changes, I feel like it has caused a lot of artists and a lot of fans to kind of like lose sight of the fact that like music is still at its best when it's a collaborative effort, you know? Just because you can, and you can, just because you can do it all by yourself or be fully in the driver's seat the entire time doesn't mean that that's going to be the best thing for the record, and the thing is, like, there are some artists for sure, and we all hold them in high regard and we all wish that we were them, like either a Prince or a Trent Reznor, who, yeah, that's truly a person who just does it all on their own, and like, they're calling all the shots. But the thing is, like, you know, artists like that are just such a rare breed. And again, I think all the power, influence, and technology has caused a lot of people to think like, oh, I could do what he does, and it's like, no, actually, you can't. You know,
No, yeah,
and
you
again,
actually need to dial in that expertise to add a texture, to add a layer to what you do. And music is collaborative. It's supposed to be like a shared communal experience. So to make it so isolated can feel very myopic.
right, exactly. And the thing is, like, we look at Michael Jackson as like the king of pop, and the thing is, like, his best songs and best records were some of the most collaborative in pop music, point blank period. That man
Right.
could have not done anything, any of the great songs, any of the classics, any of the anything that we love so much across his career by himself. He was not a DIYer. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, there's a lot of greatness in everything that he did, but a lot of everything that he did also came down to the efforts of other people who were there to support him along the way, and having people who had certain expertise in certain things do those things for him. Whether it was something as simple as like, yeah, free guitar solo from Van Halen, you know,
Just
on
bring
the
it dial in the troops, like, let's see who we can get to add something weird and bizarre to this, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, and it's the worst thing that you've ever heard, but it's like the overall hit rate, I think, becomes higher when you're allowing more voices into the room.
right, exactly.
Beyoncé is a good example of that too. She's very much like a curator. She's not the best writer. I don't think she plays any instruments, but she has like a curatorial eye and a hand that
Mhm.
guides her projects. And I think Taylor could absolutely occupy that kind of a space if she would just relinquish a bit of the doing, but it remains to be seen.
Yeah, I agree.
Period. Well, thank you, Anthony Fantano. Everybody go check him out. You know who he is. You know where to find him. The Needle Drop, and then on his other channel, which the purpose of is to do like interviews and fun stuff.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, there you go. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.